evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Punching Left. I am AJ Wilms, joined here, as always, with my wonderful co-host, Mike Lauber. Mike, how about you tell us about what we just saw there at the beginning? And your microphone is muted.
Good point. That was just a little bit of a montage of some of the leftist meltdowns we've been seeing since the Supreme Court decision was leaked, which is now confirmed that they're all still on the same page, that this will be overturned whenever they get to it. Happy Mother's Day to everybody. But yeah, we've got a full. The circus is definitely in town tonight.
Yeah, well, things are definitely heating up with the Supreme Court leak, and hopefully the Supreme Court follows through with overturning Roe versus Wade and Casey versus Planned Parenthood. We're of course hoping and praying for that all the time. And I think not only do we have liberal freakouts over this, like we just saw, but we also have some more violent kind of freakouts from the left over the abortion ban or the potential abortion bans that could happen in states after Roe v. Wade is overturned. And what is this we have up here now?
Yeah, and just for a little background, we already saw like right after the decision was released, you had attacks out in Los Angeles. There were a bunch of Homeland Security vehicles that were firebombed because LA's police department's completely overwhelmed right now, so they do have help in from the federal government, unrelated to the abortion being overturned or Roe v. Wade being overturned. But uh, last we had a what was it, an anti-abortion office. They were firebombed by Antifa, and we do have some video of this. We'll kind of play in the background here in a second. But these are some images from the aftermath. They spray painted on the side. If abortions aren't safe, then neither are you. And this is just a shot of the inside of the office. They didn't do a lot of. They didn't do a ton of damage. Knock some windows out. It doesn't look. It's not like they burned the building down. But still, like this is just the start. And
Well, yeah, and it really underlines the point, which I think is very important, that they spray painted right on the wall. If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either. And it's like this is, again, as we've discussed in the past, this is a legitimate form of terrorism. When you say we want something, we have an ideological goal, we have a political goal, and we're going to get to it by using violence, and we're going to terrify people until we get what we want. I mean, this is absolutely absurd what they're doing, and people don't seem to be taking this as seriously as they should. Where's the government? Where are all these organizations, pro-life organizations, rallying together? I've seen many get together, but not to the full extent that we need to be. We need to be kind of collectivizing, getting together, and fighting back against these actual and literal terrorists who are attacking pro-life groups.
yeah, because that's exactly what this is they are trying to intimidate the justices, and they have said as much. They're trying to intimidate the public too to turn on this, to back down and voice that they don't want this decision changed. But this is exactly what we saw with BLM. You know, before they held whole cities hostage, they did $2 billion worth of damage. 40 people lost their lives, and we will see the same thing. I mean, it is almost riot season again. Things are warming up. It's going to get crazy out there.
Yeah, things are going to be picking up, and it's going to get a lot worse, I think. And I mean, this is extremely concerning, like I said, because this is a actual act of terrorism. You can see the inside of the office being shown here, and it's frightening because it looks like an actual like explosion happening. You can see there's fire damage there. And, luckily we're dealing with Antifa, and they're not the smartest people, so they probably lit themselves on fire like they did in the BLM riots, and they weren't very effective at what they were doing. But this really, again, outlines the actual kind of sinister and frightening point that we are at the level now where you have the left committing acts of terrorism, trying to burn down buildings, as they've done during the BLM riots, burn down private establishments, businesses, and now pro-life organizations. They're trying to hurt people so that they can achieve their political goals. And that's the most frightening part of all of this.
Yeah, and this is the real danger here is you also have voices in the media that are justifying this and even encouraging it. Um, there was a series of protests held at some of the justices' homes last night and the night before, after these people were doxxed, after the two Supreme Court justices were doxxed. I don't think they've doxxed all. Well, I guess they did. They did release all six conservative justices' home addresses, but I don't think they've actually had protests at all of them. But
Right, and it's another form of like terrorism almost to be
Yeah,
going after people selectively because of their ideological stances in their private lives. I mean, the court is supposed to be impartial. Obviously, people have their biases, but it's actually kind of ironic because the conservative justices, we say that the conservatives have a conservative bias in the Supreme Court. The conservatives are really just saying we're actually going to follow the intent of the Supreme Court, which is to do founders' intent, which is to follow what the founding fathers would have wanted and the amendment writers would have wanted. It's the left that's actually the only ones who are politicized saying, no, we don't want to follow what the founders want. We want to do our own agenda, which is the left-wing agenda. But nevertheless, you have the left-wingers in America trying to dox conservative justices, putting their lives in dangers, and sure enough, showing up at their houses. And we'll talk more about this later. But
yeah.
I don't know, Mike. Like, what do you think of all this insanity that's going on right now?
Well, it is. I mean, what's really scary is that it's being encouraged by figures in the media, and I'm not talking like people that are publicly a leftist agitator anyway, that are just a commentator. It's mainstream news networks. It's CNN and ABC, NBC. It's all the usual suspects. Um, that they are not telling people, not to get violent or anything else. And this what's on the screen now, these are images from today, from Mother's Day, from another part of this protest. So they went into Catholic and evangelical churches today to target those, to basically harass parishioners, worshipers that were there on Sunday during Mother's Day. And we're going to roll some footage from this here in the background. There's no audio because I don't think anybody wants to hear a bunch of harpies screaming, and then there's a lot of foul language in some of these clips. But again, it'll give you an idea of what people were facing in different parts of the country today.
Yeah, and as you can see here, yeah, go ahead, play the B-roll here. You can see like just pure craziness. This isn't the crazy part yet. Just
Yeah.
wait. The half-naked woman screaming is not even as bad as it gets. There's more footage here. Do apologize for the way she's dressed.
Yeah, or
We
not
don't have,
dressed.
yeah, or the lack thereof dress. So she, this woman is walking around, very promiscuously, holding a baby with like, what is that, like, tied up with
I guess
clothes?
it's supposed to be like an umbilical cord. I don't even know. I watched this several times with the audio on. It doesn't make any sense what she's saying anyway. You can only hear about half of it. But
And she's like trying to rip apart like the baby or something. I mean, it's sick. It is
yeah,
truly like demonic what's happening. And it's funny when you look at like the pro-abortion people, this is who you're dealing with, like right here. And then you can look beside her to her left right now. You have these guys standing there in their suits, like defending the church. They're just normal guys, suit and
yeah,
tie, tall, the straight white male Christian. And then you have like the they, them,
yeah.
black,
Unhinged
gray haired,
lunatic.
unhinged Antifa person. And I mean, it's a stark contrast when you look at it. And I mean, this truly is a fight versus good and evil. And you can see you have Christians on one side and then these demonic people advocating for killing babies on the other. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, and again, it's the same thing that we saw with the video we showed last time with the students for Kerry Lake, where they shot that on a college campus somewhere with, again, all these
Right.
left leftist mutants just out there causing trouble and harassing them, assaulting them. And
Yeah.
again, nothing is done about this, even though it is direct violations of the law. These are physical assaults that are taking place, but no one's being arrested. There is no one on our side is or no one's defending our side. This is being encouraged. And again, like it's stated over and over again, our words are considered violence where their violence is considered words.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's shameful to see things like this. And I've talked in the past about just how demonic like abortion really is. And when you think about it, it's that you're sacrificing your own child for
Yeah.
your own, satisfaction in bed, for your own fun over the weekend. That's what you're willing to give up your child's life for. And it is almost like a humiliation ritual that Satan uses us for to shame us in front of God. And it's so upsetting to see that so many people have fallen for this trick and this deceitful act that is abortion, being told, oh, abortion is a woman's right. It's something good. It's something that's not bad at all. It's absolutely evil. It is one of the most evil acts that a human can possibly do. It is one of the worst things a mother could do in her life, sacrifice her own child's life for her own sexual satisfaction, so she can have fun for her own convenience. I mean, it's disgusting.
Yeah. Well, and it really is just it's a lack of responsibility. People want to go out and do the crime and not have to do the time. And that is exactly what it is. It's putting that off, that responsibility. And it is induction to a cult. People like to say it's the sacrament of the left, and it really is. Look how they're just flying apart. This isn't even banning abortion, and people have to keep this in mind. This is just putting it back on the states and taking the
Right.
power out of federal hands. There's
Yep.
still going to be at least 24 states where this is allowed unrestricted, and a lot of these, as we've seen, they're turning from abortion to infanticide. You have California, Maryland, and what was the third state that are now pushing infanticide laws, like up to 28 days after birth, you can go kill your child if you decide you don't want it.
Yeah, I'm not familiar, but I do know that it's happening all across the nation. It's happening more and more, unfortunately, and it's extremely upsetting to see. And you're right that this Supreme Court case would only go to send it back to the states to decide their laws on abortion. And it's insane to think that too, because people are acting as if abortion will be outlawed throughout the entire country, which it should be. And in fact, I think what the Supreme Court should do, and unfortunately, I don't think our Supreme Court is strong enough to do this right now. I don't think we have enough true constitutionalists and conservatives on the court to do this. But what they should do is issue like a complete reversal of Roe v. Wade, not just like oh, yeah, it was decided wrong and move on, but like almost like they did, and I believe it was the Dred Scott case, where they like totally reversed everything, and slaves went from being viewed as property, and that was a constitutionally protected right to have a slave, to now it was actually illegal constitutionally to own a slave, right? So it wasn't just that they said, oh, slavery is not a constitutionally protected right, it's up to the states to decide. They did like a full-on reversal, and that's what we need to see with abortion as well.
Well, you're exactly right, and that is what we need. But unfortunately, you're also right about our Supreme Court not being that strong, as we've already seen with Barrett and Kavanaugh, that they are far better than Sotomayor and the other liberal justices, but they're not exactly swing for the fences conservatives. They're not going to go out and shake anything up.
Right.
Um, and we also know our court is easily intimidated, as we saw with all the election violations and refusing to even hear a case that they clearly had jurisdiction on, since it was a dispute between states.
Yeah, and this has been a long time coming as well, because you see, even with a lot of the unconstitutional executive orders that Obama issued, the court would just totally let it pass. And obviously, we always have a couple good justices, but
Yeah.
by and large, the majority, like the court, would allow it to happen. And then the same thing with Trump's wall. It's like, how many times did it get challenged in court, and it took so long for them to finally say, oh, yeah, this actually was allowed. It never should have even got to the Supreme Court. They should have just said, no, it's fine to do. We're not even taking this. We're not even going to discuss it. It should have been done and over with. But unfortunately, we don't have these extremely strong justices on the conservative side that we need.
Yeah, and that's the game the left likes to play, is this death by a thousand cuts. They like to drag things out in court and just lawfare you to death. And whether that's by like running out a private individual's funds to fight back, or with the wall, dragging it out for basically
Yeah.
almost 3 years
Yeah.
before anything was done, even though they know they're wrong, they know the law is not on their side, but they also know they can prevent things from happening, and that works
Mm.
to their favor. Again, with the media hyping it up, we've seen the same thing with a lot of these election crimes, where there's been a lot of victories on Trump or on our side, but those are never reported. But when there's a loss, they put it on blast. You hear it
Right.
everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing too, as we've discussed many times in the past, there has been times when there has been people convicted of voter fraud because of the 2020 election, obviously trying to swing the election in favor of Biden. And there are people who are convicted of these crimes, or people who have been charged with these crimes. There is evidence, undoubtedly, that this happened, but yet you'll never hear this reported by any major mainstream networks like Fox or CNN or ABC or any of these major networks on TV or anything.
Yeah, we're going to get to more of that later, because there is some actually breaking stories in that realm. But not to get too far off topic, let's move back to. I kind of alluded to this earlier, that Democrats are openly encouraging what's happening right now, with both the parishioners being harassed at church and with these protests at Supreme Court. Nancy Pelosi was on Face the Nation this morning, uh, saying that, their intention is to push the decision a different direction, to intimidate these justices, to terrorize them into changing their mind and changing how they're voting on the issue. Um,
Right. And it's similar to when a while back Maxine Waters too was encouraging violence against,
yes.
or at least what was the word she used? She said, "Don't be afraid to be confrontational, and you go find them at a gasoline station and at
Yeah,
their
get
homes and at
get
their
in their
places of work,
face.
and get in their face and be confrontational." And she was encouraging again, almost like this precursor to terrorism, where it's like, for political reasons, go and harass these people, get in their faces, find out where they live. And it's like, well, okay, well, you tell Antifa and BLM to do that. What do you think they're going to do next? There is an obvious next step to that, where you don't just look at someone and say, oh, I see you, I'm in front of you, and then walk away as if you've done something. Antifa, BLM, these other organizations on the left, and these other terrible, terrible groups, they're going to use violence against you like they've done to so many people on the right in the past.
I heard a commentator describe it this way during all this BLM nonsense. He referred to it as like lowercase t terrorism when they were going into these restaurants while people were just having lunch and demanding everybody put up their fist in solidarity.
Right.
Um, that nobody, with all those incidents, no one was ever actually hurt or assaulted, but it was always the threat was there. And
Exactly.
yeah, you're implying that you're willing to do violence to get to further your political agenda. And people sitting there at the time, that's not how they're thinking. That it is terrorism, but it's not like you're going to like firebombing a building. So it
Well,
gives our media an excuse
yeah,
to downplay it.
and look, if ISIS walked into a classroom or something and they had guns and they said, okay, everyone become Muslim, but they didn't hit anyone, they didn't shoot anyone, and they walked out and everyone was Muslim. Well, would that be terrorism? I would probably consider that like a soft form of terrorism, right? Like there's soft power, hard power. That would probably be like a soft power way of committing a terrorist act because you're coercing people under threat of violence or under some type of coercive method to follow your political ideology. So that's exactly what Antifa's doing. You're right. They're walking into a restaurant and they are in a massive mob. People have seen how they burn down buildings and beat up people in the streets, and they do these things. And they're saying, put up your fist for Black Lives Matter. Everyone here support BLM. And they do it. And again, it's like you can see with the previous analogy, okay, is that really terrorism? I mean, we could debate it. One thing is for sure, though, this is obviously 100% wrong and evil.
Yeah. But again, like with the media on their side, that's what makes this issue so difficult. Is they do have the support of the press. They're portrayed in a positive light, and we are portrayed as the enemy. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I mean, maybe CNN's the verge of bankruptcy. They're making a lot of changes there. If you could just get straight news somewhere, I don't think it would be so bad. But with election season coming up again after riot season,
Yeah.
I don't think anything will change until after that.
Exactly. So I mean, it's upsetting too because even if the Supreme Court justices in America, and I mean these are some of the most prestigious people in the U.S., they don't have term limits like the presidents. There's only 9 of them, unlike in Congress where there's 435 of them. Right? There are only 9 justices. They have lifetime terms. They're an extremely important role in our nation. And again, 9 members make up an entire branch of government. It's not like the executive with all of its employees under the president. It's not like the legislative branch. The judicial branch is extremely sacred in American politics, and even the justices on the Supreme Court of America are not safe from this mob. And how on earth will you and your children feel safety if not even our Supreme Court justices can? They are targeting everyone from the people at the very, very top to the very bottom, and it is sick to see.
Yeah, and like just as another illustration of how unhinged some of these people have become, and unfortunately, I could not find this quote before we got started here, but there's already people out there saying like, so since the decision isn't finalized, if one of these justices were to be killed beforehand, that changes the balance of power because until the decision is released, it's not final. So there are already
Jeez.
people recommend, saying, if you find these people in the street, well, it's in God's hand what happens to them, basically.
Yeah, that's insane. And
Yeah.
I actually saw on Twitter today too. That's funny you bring that up. I didn't even consider that because someone was saying, "Oh, if we should kill the 2 justices, like the 2 more conservative justices," and I'm like, "Whoa, dude! Like, why are you acting so crazy, man?" And now it makes sense because, oh yeah, I guess like on a practical level, if you go and plan if the left plans assassinations on the Supreme Court justices who would vote against Roe versus Wade, that is reversing it, then all of a sudden, I guess it wouldn't be reversed in the end. So it's really is very disturbing how these people think. Like right wingers will be like, let's go Brandon, and then like that's like, okay, now we're done. We're done making fun of Joe Biden. We'll vote him out next election. The left will be like, okay, let's literally plot an assassination attempt on Supreme Court justices and the president and Congress people and political commentators. I mean, again, I've said it many times, but it is truly sick. It is really, really disturbing when you think about the state of our country right now.
Yeah, one of the Twitter posts I saw that was taken down basically alluded to um, they only have to get one of them because a split decision, a 4-4 decision, is the same as the law stays in effect.
Right. Yeah.
So they're basically saying, they should target all of them, but they only need to be successful once. That's all it takes. And again, it's terrorism. It's
Yeah.
trying to get one of these people to change their mind or publicly make a statement that, oh, no, I'm not going to, I've changed my opinion. I've come to the light.
Yeah, and this is something I talk about quite a lot, and where I kind of deviate with a lot of conservatives is I think a lot of conservatives like to focus on like China and Russia and these kind of geopolitical threats that face America, and I think a threat that's even more pressing to us though is the people within our own country, unfortunately, who are on the left. Because if you take a look at what they're trying to do and plotting, it's like I don't know, maybe China is plotting assassination attempts on Supreme Court justices so we can continue to murder our babies in this country. But I certainly hear that a lot from the left in this country. And that is what's so disturbing to me is that it's our own people in our own country who are trying to basically sabotage this whole country. And I don't know, maybe there is some external influence going on there. I'm not sure. I think people like, George Soros and these other billionaires who are in America are certainly, sticking their nose in these kind of situations and funding
Sure.
these things. And you have Bail Project. There's a deep rabbit hole you can go down with all these mega investors. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is like homegrown issues. And that's what, to me, is one of the most disturbing parts of this.
Yeah, it's our friends and neighbors, and in the case of Justice Kavanaugh, it's his literal neighbor. So this protest, and part of what people are assuming or some of this information that led to their doxing came from, is Kavanaugh's next door neighbor. We did erase her address on here. This isn't the first time she's done this. During the Ketanji Brown Jackson, I still can't say that lady's name. During her hearings, she already had an event that she staged by her house, a dance protest to Kavanaugh. Basically, this was done on International Women's Day to celebrate Justice Brown Jackson. But she's the one that organized this protest that then went to his house and to the home of another justice. He she set it up, posted this to Facebook. It circulated around, and that's why everybody showed up there.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see just how quickly the left can mobilize as well, because this woman put something out on Facebook, and that's how this all started. The flyers that can be seen by Mike over there on the left hand side
Yeah,
of the screen. These flyers were put out by this woman on her Facebook page, and you get all of these people who just show up. And this is, of course, in DC, correct?
yeah. This is in DC or a suburb of DC.
Right, yeah. So I mean, and you can imagine something like what was it, 5% of DC voted for Trump in 2016 or something like,
Yeah,
it's not a very Republican area, right? It's not a very conservative. And by the way, the Republicans who are there are not very conservative. They're all rhinos, it seems.
yeah.
So, to get people out to this event, it seems, it's like, how on earth is it that in a district that is primarily Democrat, they can get people out like that to do something that is like borderline illegal? But then on the
It
right
is
wing, it's
illegal.
like, yeah, it is illegal. They can get like, hundreds of people together in a moment's notice from a Facebook post to do something illegal. Meanwhile, on the right, it's like, people who have tried planning right-wing events understand how difficult it is to get people together and organize people and get people to show up to events and get people to actually follow through with the calls to actions that you make. Why on earth is the left so much more motivated and energized than the right when we have way more reasons to be legitimately motivated? What do you think, Mike?
I think the organization is part of it. Just they do work more as a collective than the right tends to. We tend to have a lot more individualists. We also tend to have jobs and things like that that prevent you from, going hanging out in front of a Supreme Court justice's house at 11 o'clock at night till 3 in the morning. And then there's also the fact that it is actually illegal. You're intimidating a federal or attempting to intimidate a federal judge. But again, we won't see the FBI get involved in this. There's no chance. Just like
Yeah.
I'm sure they're trying to find the leaker right now. And
Hmm.
we all know that's not going to happen. Or if we do, it'll be like the person whose name you still can't say on YouTube without your video taken down. That was one of the leaks for the Trump impeachment.
Right. And I mean, this is the thing. There's such an injustice in this country. The fact that, like, they can do illegal things and get away with it. They can do things that are, like, can harass government officials. They can burn down buildings. They can destroy entire cities, and they get away with it. And the FBI does absolutely nothing to stop them. Meanwhile, with us, we have a virtuous, we have a righteous, we have a very moral and truthful goal that we have in mind. And yet we have the government clamp down on us at every single turn. Every single militia in this country, every single right-wing student group in this country, every single right-wing organization in this country has the government or NGOs like the ADL, SPLC, ACLU breathing down their necks. And it is completely unjust that we cannot even do legal things without being in trouble. Meanwhile, the left can burn down cities and kill people and get away with it, literally get away with murder.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it'll be swept under the rug if it is reported at all. we've mentioned this several times. Well, like with the subway shooter in New York, the
Yep.
minute his motivations became clear that he was a black nationalist, um, they disappear the story. I mean, yeah, it'll pop back up when he gets sentenced here in a few months. You'll hear one day of coverage. But again,
Exactly.
if this was a right wing person, it would be wall to wall, 24-hour coverage. That like this is Satan incarnate himself that did it.
Absolutely, and I mean, even looking at the Waukesha parade attack too,
Yeah,
when it came out that that person was a black nationalist, had a lot of anti-white propaganda on his Facebook page. You know, Facebook deletes the page immediately, so no one can see it. The news does not run any of it. I'm sure if they can, they're like the news is trying to scrub this story and put it as far away as possible. Or if they do report it, absolutely no mention of the fact that that again was terrorism committed against white people, because the media and academia are pushing this racial division in this country so much that it gets to the point where you have these black nationalists who start committing terrorist attacks. And again, contrary to what the FBI says, white nationalism and white supremacy and neo-Nazis are not the main culprits of terrorism in this country. There is no terrorist attacks from these people. It is all from the left. It's from Antifa, it's from BLM and other left-wing organizations.
yeah. When Mayorkas was getting grilled under oath last week, I don't remember if it was Ted Cruz or who it was that asked him that, like if he could had any specific cases that had to do with white nationalists or any other like right wing terrorist organization groups that the FBI was currently pursuing. He said had to admit they didn't have any.
Yeah, zero. Like
Yeah,
they didn't have one. They're we have nothing for you guys. What? Not one? Are you guys serious? Not a single one? Because there is a lot of attacks on Christian people in this country. There are a lot of attacks on white people in this country. There are a lot of attacks on patriotic Americans from globalists and other groups. So it's like I can point to quite a lot of examples where it's the other way around, actually. But yet, the FBI's priorities are solely and squarely placed on the white straight male Christian, right, who loves his nation. It's
yeah.
the exact opposite of what it should be. These are the people who built this country, and it's the Christian people who maintain the moral like high ground in this country and created the moral framework that makes this nation great. And yet, they are trying to attack those people the most.
Yeah, well, maybe the FBI just hasn't got around to infiltrating any new groups or creating any new hate groups
Yeah.
after their efforts for the Whitmer case got flushed when the judge threw the case out. And, they do have their 80 agents from January 6th. Now, we're up to 80 agents potentially that were part of the January 6th mob.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe just everybody's already tied up. They just haven't been able to infiltrate or create any new terror cells they can try to pin on the right.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think that it only takes like one crazy event to be like the hallmark. I mean, we saw this with like Charlottesville back in 2017. That was like the hallmark, like, this is why, we can't have right wing extremists be in rallies. This is why we can't have free speech. And, politicians lay everything in there. They'll say, like, this is why conservatives can't have rallies and stuff. And that was kind of like the boogeyman. And it's like, it only takes one bad event. It only takes one death. It only takes one, crazy person to do this. And it makes me wonder, like, hey, if I were a cynical government agent who is an atheist and like some communist, and I just had to plan one event to go sideways to smear the right wing for the next 5 years, that would not be out of the options for me as a crazy, government person.
Yeah, it's, especially if you have the power, you're already within an agency, and you have access to this kind of thing. It's not that hard. And even if the smear doesn't last 5 years, you can't drag it out between two election cycles like the Charlottesville thing.
Right.
Um, you still are doing a lot of political damage to your opponents. Think about it, like a year and a half, um, basically at this point, that people have been in jail for January 6th. Again, a lot of these for crimes that normally somebody wouldn't even do 30 days for
Yeah.
trespassing.
Right.
And it creates a narrative because you have all your friends in the Mockingbird media that are just going to repeat it like a bunch of parrots, um, and drive the point home. It doesn't have to be true. People believe it's true if they hear it enough.
Exactly. And that's the upsetting part, is that we have a completely controlled media in this country. And we like to think, well, we don't have state run media, so therefore we're protected against like centralized control over media. It's an absolute lie. Our media is controlled. Our media unilaterally goes one direction, with the rare, or the exception of Fox News. And even them, there's a lot of news that they don't cover because they don't want to fly too close to the sun. They kind of just want to be the center right, the mainstream conservative kind of network. And any actual populist or nationalistic right wing network gets shut down immediately and can't compete.
Exactly. Well, our friends in the media do want everyone to know that all this violence right now that you're seeing in response to this Roe v. Wade being overturned, it's all the right's fault.
Oh, of course. That makes total sense. It's Christian extremism and terrorism because, again, comes full circle, right? They're the ones burning down buildings. They literally firebomb a pro-life office, and then the next day, Christian extremists are the terrorist.
Yeah, and
You can't make this up.
do you know why I know there's no examples of any right wing or Christian terrorism in response to the Roe v. Wade being
Why is that?
overturned? It'd be everywhere.
It
You
would
wouldn't be able
be.
to escape it. This would
Exactly.
be plastered up and down the walls, 24-hour news. It wouldn't matter what it was. It could be some minor event with somebody shoving someone in front of an abortion clinic, and you would hear
Right.
it'd be wall-to-wall coverage. And
Yep.
again, these stories, the firebombing and other things, are basically being ignored. Uh, Not 100%. The firebombs can be obviously covered locally, and you can find snippets of it here and there, but this is not what you're hearing.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, again, the media is completely corrupted. We've known this for a while now, but you're seeing the acceleration of it as they can just make up blatant lies to slander people. Again,
Yes.
they slander men, they slander white people, they slander Christian people, as this example shows up here: Christian extremism and terrorism. And it's like, really, the pro-life movement is Christian extremism and terror? It's just, first of all, being pro-life is just regular. I wouldn't even say regular Christianity. That's just regular humanity. If you're
Yeah.
just a normal human being and you believe in like human rights and not murder, that's pretty much most religions. I think most people who are even irreligious or like against murder, you should be pro-life. Okay, nothing really extreme about that. And I'm glad that Christians are being attributed to not murdering babies. But I mean, this should really be something that's generally accepted by our country. And terrorism, what? Like what? Because back in the 80s, someone blew up an abortion clinic or something that was empty. Was that what the connection is? It's
Yeah.
absurd.
Well, yeah, because again, like they like to point back to things like that happened 30 years ago. Like, yes, there were abortion clinics that were bombed. There were a couple abortion doctors that were murdered as well. But again, we're talking 30 to 40 years ago for these cases, not recent times. It didn't happen, within the last 48 hours, like this firebombing and these protests out in front of the justices' houses or harassing people while they're at
Right.
church on Mother's Day. That's
Right.
happened within the last 12 hours.
Exactly. I was about to say that. Yeah, and did that happen 30 years ago, or like yesterday, or like you said, 12 hours ago? It happened 12 hours ago in this,
Yeah.
and we don't hear anything about it. It's crickets, and we won't ever hear anything about these stories because it doesn't suit the narrative of the media.
Well, I should have grabbed one of these clips just to like juxtapose it, but I did see an MSNBC clip earlier where they mentioned these protests that were occurring in the churches, but as if it's this is a brave thing, people taking a stand. And of course, they don't show the like lunatic out in New York that was marching up and down the one video we had. It's a couple people walk in the back of a church with signs. They hold them up. They say their little piece, and they like walk back out a few minutes later.
Right.
They go and what's sad is that's I'm sure the exception, not the rule. That at least they came in, just did what they wanted to do, made their point, and they left. They didn't
Yeah.
stay there and harass people for hours on end, or chase them through the parking lot. Uh,
Well,
but
and it's an interesting point too to bring up that like we don't do these things to the left, and they do it to us, right? Like
yeah,
Antifa shows up to right wing events. Right wingers do not show up to Antifa events, right?
no,
When Chaz was going on, you did not have like Proud Boys and Oath Keepers and Three Percenters and all these kind of like right wing groups showing up there to start problems, right? But when the Proud Boys or the Three Percenters or the Oath Keepers like have an event or whatever, you can guarantee yourself that Antifa is going to show up and start attacking people. And then if any of these groups defend themselves, like what happened with the Proud Boys in New York, then
yeah,
the media records it only one sided, and then the right wingers go to prison and the left wingers get off with no crimes or no punishment. And what's even more crazy is Antifa. A lot of people don't know this, but Antifa, like, they really don't like Democrats. They don't like Republicans. They hate the cops. So when they
yeah,
get in fights, sometimes they'll just be like, screw you, cops, and they'll walk away. But guess what? There's no crime then. There's no victim. The two groups fight. They both go away. Neither talk to the cops. The cops are like, whatever. It's like the district attorneys. It's the politicians who start saying, okay, time for some political persecution time. And they find witnesses and they drag people in and they make the case.
yeah.
There's no victim, though.
Well, yeah, and isn't that exactly like what happened with Enrique Torrio,
Yep.
Proud Boys? So one of these fights, I think it was the one in New York. Afterwards, of course, like Antifa scurries off like the cockroaches they are, off into the shadows. Whereas when there's a call for what happened, people that are in the Proud Boys and other right-wing groups will come forward. They want to file reports, tell the police they got attacked. But again, when the other side of the equation is gone,
Yeah.
they just charge them like, oh, so now you're here telling us you did commit violence, and even though they try to say, yeah, it was in self-defense, we were attacked first. Like,
Yeah.
well, that's okay. We're still going to charge you for assault, and because those signs you had wooden poles, now we're going to charge you for having possession of weapons. And they throw the book at them. It's any little thing, and this is again lawfare. It's putting so much weight on top of these people that they can't possibly fight back. That you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're bankrupt. It's not like we can put an account up on GoFundMe to try to help with these legal bills.
Yeah. And great point. Like, the companies don't support us. So you can't go on GoFundMe. You can't go on YouTube and stuff. You'll be banned. You'll be shadow banned. You can't go on Twitter. You'll be shadow banned until hopefully recently now that will change. And then also on the other hand, you don't even have people to help you with your legal funds. You don't have like legal fund networks. Like on the left, they have the Bail Project where they bail out actual criminals like Darrell Brooks, the Waukesha massacre killer. He was bailed out by the Bail Project. He already had a bunch of charges against him and was supposed to be going to prison.
Yeah.
But because there was an NGO that bailed him out so that he could commit a terrorist attack, he could go out and do that. The right-wingers, who are actually innocent, do not have networks like that. And this is, again, what frustrates me. We talked earlier about how the left is more collective and the right is more individualistic. That sounds good on like a political philosophy level. But on a practical level, you start to understand why if this group gets together to kill you and you all like say, let's all defend ourselves individually, it's not going to work out well for your group. And that's what you're seeing in real life politics today. Right-wingers say, I'm not going to help you with your legal costs. I'm in this for myself. What if I need the money for my legal costs? And guess what? We all get demolished by this big collective of left-wingers who come after each and every one of us and pick us off one by one.
Yeah, like I don't know how many times we need to see the same story repeat itself before we get the message, but obviously like with the Canadian truckers, they were deplatformed. And then we had Give, Send, Go enter the picture. And that's what we should be turning on. So when we do have an event like this, the next time where somebody's going to jail or arrested for something that isn't a crime or the law is being twisted against them, we need to get together and we need to support these people. We need to make a statement. Even if Facebook won't let you share the message or Twitter won't let you tweet about it, you got to get the word out, even if it's by old-fashioned phone calls.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and the thing is a lot of the times on these social media, networks or accounts or companies or whatever, you can send direct links and get your message out. And that's how you need to share it, is by sharing with your friends. Like there's many times in which, on my own show or on this show, the algorithm does not pick up the show. It age restricts us. They do a lot of stuff to jam us up in the algorithm. And that's why it's important that we actually just like take the link and share it. And we advocate that people just share the link with their friends if they enjoy the content. That's what I've had to do myself. And it's a workaround that's necessary given the current situation we find ourselves in with these terrible companies trying to suppress our voices.
Yeah. Speaking of companies, one thing that is sort of interesting with this whole fight over abortion right now is a lot of the big PR firms are all telling companies, stay out of this one. This is not a fight you want to get in. And I'm actually kind of surprised by this, considering how many times and how willing most corporations are to put their foot in their mouth.
Right.
So I'm guessing the polling for Democrats is even worse on this abortion issue than we think it is. And then these people going out there just like unhinged loonies right now is definitely not helping the equation.
Yeah.
Again, the average person sees a protest in front of a church with somebody having a mock abortion, carrying a baby doll around. That doesn't exactly make them want to jump on their side.
Yeah, well, and it's upsetting because there actually are some companies who are really dumb and they're going to not listen to this advice, which I think is very sound advice. So you have companies like Yelp, you have companies like Tesla. Elon, what are you doing, man? You got to crack down on Tesla, get a new CEO or something of them.
Yeah.
If he's not the CEO. And also companies like Amazon, I believe, and they're actually paying for women to get abortions. And there's actually an article on my website, nationaltraditionalism.com, where someone wrote an article on the actually Jack Anderson. We had him on the show. He wrote an article on how Yelp is allowing women to get abortions. And in their article, their justification was, or in the article, the justification is clearly shown that Yelp came out and said, we want women, our employees, to get abortions because it increases workplace productivity. And they're telling women that what they should do is kill their own babies so that they can be more productive in the workplace. And I almost feel like this is like a perfect, what's like a perfect example of like the guys back in the 50s who were like, women shouldn't be in the workforce, and people are like, what do you have to fear, buddy? And it's like, now we move to 2022 and we literally have employers like, we're going to make your wife get an abortion so she can put more like, lids on toothpaste or whatever. Wow,
Yeah,
that's awesome. Put more things in boxes for Amazon. It's insane. It's absurd to me. Like, what kind of world are we living in right now?
yeah. This employee's overall productivity will decrease if she has to take 6 weeks off to have a baby. So let's just
Exactly.
pay 4 grand for her to go kill that sucker.
Exactly. And isn't it sick? Because that is literally what is happening. And
Yeah,
I don't know. I mean, this is the thing. It's like I've always said my loyalty is first and foremost to God and to morality and to justice. It's not to like capitalism or limited government or this or this or this or that. And I do think that like we need to take hard stances against these mega corporations who are now literally incentivizing our sisters, our daughters, our mothers to get abortions. They're coercing them into doing this just so that they can make more money. They're placing money over the life of your future grandchild or your future cousin or niece or whoever. And to me, that is extremely, extremely disgusting.
yeah. And I mean, it is just virtue signaling too. It's saying maybe it is just saying they don't want the leftists to come burn down our building, but it it can be expected. Like Amazon, I'm not surprised. That's typical of Bezos and their policy. They're always going to side with the left. Um, Same really with Tesla. It's again a company that caters to leftists. I'm a little surprised Elon Musk would let them get away with it. With some of these, I wonder if this was something written into their health insurance beforehand that they would pay for travel for something like that, just like other
Well,
medical procedures.
yeah, because with the Yelp situation, they had always had it that abortion was covered under their health insurance plan. They
Yeah.
made sure they had that in it, right? But now they came out and said, now we're going to pay for your travel expenses. So we'll literally, give you days off work and we'll fly you out to an abortion clinic, I guess, if it's out of state, or you'll pay for your Uber or whatever. And I mean, they're expanding some of these companies on their already existing satanic policies.
Yeah, exactly. That's really what it's about. Um, and it's their way to try to put a thumb in the eye of anybody that's happy that Roe v. Wade is finally going to be overturned.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, and it's very upsetting to see these things. And I like to think, for example, that like God created our people, God created, the American people and all the different peoples on earth. And we as a country should be seeking to preserve that. God did not create like economic systems for us. God did not create like the Planned Parenthood. God did not create these government structures. And yet it seems like a lot of the times conservatives get mistaken and they say, well, we just need to preserve these human constructions that we have. Like, oh, our economic system, our government system, this. All of that is just a human creation. It's imperfect. What God has created is us as humans, it's us as Americans, it's our people, and that is what we should be seeking to preserve. And abortion is undoubtedly the one thing that is so clear cut, killing our people, that there is no possible way you could be a nationalist and be in favor of abortion.
Oh, exactly. The left always likes to put these either extreme outlier circumstances or, in this case, nowadays, improbabilities, things that don't even happen. They want to try to make people feel sorry for it. Like, oh, what about the case of rape and incest? And that's not never what's actually being argued.
No.
Because even with an outright ban on abortion, I'm sure people would still be okay with like emergency contraceptive for rape victims
Yeah, of course.
and, incest cases like that. But instead, they want to focus people's attention on that so they don't see the real problem or what's
Right.
really going on.
Right. Well, I saw a tweet today, and it actually like outlined your point very well. And it said, it was like a girl, and it was like her speaking, right? It was like a cartoon meme, and it was like, I use rape and incest victims to justify my abortion just because I want to have unprotected sex, and that's how it
Yeah,
is. Because it's like, okay, look, 0.6% of self-reported abortions are because of rape and incest, right? And I don't know, we don't even know how accurate, like those numbers could be inflated, because maybe some people are like, oh my gosh, I totally wasn't raped, but that's like the only excuse I can give to get away with this, right? I don't know, maybe that's a small number, but that's something that needs to be accounted for statistically. 0.6%, though, is all the self-reported cases of abortion because of rape or incest. That's less than 1%. So look,
yeah,
pro-abortion people, if I just grant you that 0.6%, can we get rid of the 99% of abortions that happen, the over 99% of abortions that happen? No, of course not. They're just trying to use the 0.6% to justify the over 99% of abortions that they actually seek to have.
yeah. That'd be a good law for a state to pursue. That is the only way that it's allowed, and there have to be criminal charges attached to it. Also, there has to be a police
Right.
investigation. So if you're going to go into one of these clinics for because of rape or incest, that you also have to bring with you a police report.
Right, because and that is the thing too, and people will say, "Oh, well, you wanted to prove it. Like, what is up with that?" But the thing is that even with our current method of determining health of the mother, the reason why any of these states that pass an abortion bill, a lot of the times, even in conservative states, they'll have an exception carved out for the health of the mother, and the reason for that is because if you read the original document of Roe versus Wade, it says that a woman can receive an abortion. It's constitutionally protected up until the third trimester, up until birth, really. Is if she has a health concern. And there was a similar Supreme Court decision on abortion that happened the same day as Roe versus Wade, Doe versus Bolton, that determined what health was. And it included, as we've discussed previously on the show, mental health, physical health, emotional health, social health, financial health. So all the time when you see like an abortion bill be passed, if you hear someone like, wait a minute, I don't want an exception for the woman's health, it's not because we're like, we hate women. It's like, no, literally because she'll say, oh, my mental health, I'm not ready to have a baby. That is legally a justifiable reason to kill your baby up until birth in any state in this country because of Roe versus Wade and Doe versus Bolton and the health exception. So the only exception should be the life of the mother, right? Or like you said, Mike, if we want to compromise or whatever, even if it's rape or incest, there has to be some type of evidence because otherwise anyone can just claim anything and then it's legally allowed.
Yeah, because even the health of the mother thing is largely untrue anymore. Maybe in 1973 it was true, and there were medical procedures that without an abortion weren't possible. From what I understand today, there are ones where the likely outcome is the baby would die during the procedure, but that's not really viewed as the same thing. If the
Right.
life of the mother is really really at stake, and you have to have surgery for, I don't know, cancer or car accident, you'll bleed to death otherwise.
Yeah.
That it's unfortunate that the child is lost during that procedure, but it's not viewed as an abortion. But that's another thing that where the left
Right.
likes to conflate that into the numbers and say, oh, see, if this hadn't happened, this woman would have died.
Right. Well, and see, from a pro-life position, our position is that we're going to save as many lives as possible. If we can have both the mother and the baby live, we'll do that. If it's one or the other, we're going to save one of the lives. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So if the woman's dying and we can save the baby, emergency C-section, pull out the baby. If the mom's going to die anyways and we can save one life, we're going to do it. Same vice versa. If there's a car accident and both lives are going to die, or we can just save the mother, it's an extremely difficult situation we find ourselves in. It's like the trolley cart problem.
Yeah.
But if you can save one life instead of 0 lives, you're going to do that.
Yeah, exactly. But again, that's not the argument that people are having. Nobody wants to
No.
look at it that way. I do want to say this, and then we can kind of move on to another topic. But
Sure.
Clarence Thomas did make a statement earlier that the court is not going to be bullied. Apparently, he's talked to some of the other justices. They are not going to sway their position. So at least there is some good news for now. We'll let the terrorism from the left continue. They can go out there and look like fools. Hopefully, our justices really do stand strong, and hopefully, they're all safe.
Yeah, well, God bless Thomas for standing tall there because I thought Thomas was his first name for a second there. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not on a first name basis with Tom. Me and Tom aren't that close. No, yeah,
No,
Justice
not yet.
Thomas though, God bless him for standing up and not being intimidated by these actual terrorist attacks and influencing the court in a positive way. I love to see that.
Yeah, exactly. And like put any pushback at all drives the left insane. That's the other reason
Yeah,
I love to see like these kind of statements
right.
because I'm sure they'll be just seething over this. Um, so I also wanted to discuss 2,000 Mules. This came out earlier this week. It's already, I mean, their Twitter account I think was taken down in 2 hours once they started protesting, or once they started posting about it. And you're already seeing basically media blackout on this. They were attacked on Rumble right after the launch to make it impossible for people to watch it through the streaming service. Um, this movie is going to be big because, again, it's well documented, collected evidence, and they've already stated they're releasing everything. It's all going to be public, and I'm sure people will be using this to pursue legal cases.
Wow, that's great. And for those viewers who don't know, 2,000 Mules is obviously then about the election in 2020. Did you want to kind of give like a brief synopsis of the
Yeah.
movie here?
Yeah, this is a film that was released by Dinesh D'Souza. A lot of it was material that was provided and produced by True the Vote. They went around and got both video evidence of mules, people that were dropping off piles of ballots they'd harvested in different states, Georgia, Michigan, other places, and then uh, fed into the drop boxes, the also illegal drop boxes. But what makes this really interesting is they did also get cell phone data and track down where a lot of these people were coming from. And we'll talk about this more in a second, but a lot of them in Georgia were trafficked from Stacey Abrams' office and from another, I think it was a DNC headquarters office. So again, this is a political party is somehow involved with illegally harvesting votes and then flooding these illegal ballot boxes with illegal votes and to sway an election.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see who's involved in this as well. That you have the Democratic Party and elected officials of theirs even like actually involved in going through with these plans, which is quite concerning. You know, you think of Watergate, for example, and it's like, oh, Nixon sent someone to spy on someone else or whatever, right? And it's like, yeah, that's bad. But this is like swinging elections, and these are elected officials who are trying to undermine democracy, like one of the kind of cornerstones of our democracy is like our way of voting and being
Yeah.
able to pick our elected representatives, right? Pretty obvious stuff. You don't have to get an A in Civics 101 to understand that. And yet this is what they're doing. They're undermining our democracy and our way of electing officials. And because of that, I mean, this is a very, very serious thing.
Well, yeah, because the problem at heart is this disintegrates people's trust of the vote, of the results, and of the validity of the election in general. If you don't believe your vote is actually going to be counted, or it was the same thing we saw in a lot of states too. They added all these people onto the voter rolls, and then right after the election, they're pulled off. So things
Right.
like this that all look suspicious. Any one of them, if somebody had like a valid excuse or they had an explanation, okay, maybe. But the whole issue with the 2020 election is all this just myriad of problems from the electronic voting machines to, more people voting in Pennsylvania than there are registered voters. And several
Right.
things happen like that in other states. Or Detroit admitting they could only account for 29% of the ballots that came in of whatever county Detroit is in. That
Wow.
otherwise they, well, we have no idea where the rest of these came from or who voted.
Yeah, and that's totally unacceptable because we need to have some accountability
Yeah.
for I mean the election. Again, this is like one of the most important things within our country, within our government system is like how the citizens interact with government. And the only way that we can really do that is through voting, right? Or that is the primary way of doing that. It is what separates us from a dictatorship or a communist country or an authoritarian country. It's what separates us from a war-torn country, frankly, because if you take people's right to vote away, the only way to get what you want is through violence. And this is the issue, is when you undermine democracy, you put the country in an extremely, extremely fragile state. It's one that no one wants this country to be in.
Yeah, we don't want to be moving from the ballot box to the cartridge box, because especially in cities, a lot of people are going to die.
Right.
Like this problem needs to be resolved before the election this year, the 2022 election. If people don't trust this election, I think we will be on a road to civil war or some sort of violence, and there won't be any coming back from it.
Yeah, it's hard to say, and it depends too how far the left is going to go with pushing normal conservative people to the right, because a lot of people want to be apolitical, they don't want to get involved in politics, but they get pushed into it because their kid is now learning about being a drag queen at school, or they're being told by the government, by the president himself even, that it's the teacher's responsibility to raise children, not the parents. And I mean, you can't do this to normal people. You can't shut down churches and tell people they're bad because they're white, and be, discriminating against people for things they can't control, and then expect everything to go over smoothly. You can't attack people's children, whether it's by trying to turn someone's child transgender or trying to give their child an abortion. All of these things are extremely damaging to families, and people don't forget that. And I mean, again, we're going to see how far the left pushes the right, because you can expect a very harsh reaction. We saw this with Trump getting elected. He was this like right-wing, reactionary, populist candidate, kind of no one really expected to be here or get elected, and yet he did. And that was a result of the left pushing the right so far that we became reactionary. What's going to happen, though, when you take away our option to elect Trump and you say, well, voting doesn't do anything for you guys. Now what are you going to do?
Yeah, this is another example of lawfare too. They just tried and failed to get Marjorie Taylor Greene off the ballot, and I know they're pursuing things against Madison Cawthorn and I believe some other candidates in different areas. There's shenanigans that were going on with somebody else in. Unfortunately, I didn't grab the story, but they were just successfully pulled off a Republican off a primary ballot in another state. And again, shenanigans. It was outside of the window. There was an opportunity to pull her, but instead they wait till the last minute right before the primary, so then nothing can be done legally.
Yep.
And if these kind of games keep getting played, it isn't going to work out well. And like you said a second ago, like all this transgenderism and CRT and all this other garbage is pushing people further and further to the
Yeah.
right. I just saw a Rasmussen poll earlier today where if the election were held today, Trump would win by 14 points nationally, which is insane.
Wow. That is insane. And again,
Yeah,
people scratch their heads wondering why this is, at least people on the left. And it's because, again, particularly because you're targeting children. CRT has been being taught in this country for a very long time. It's been being taught in universities. And in fact, I would argue CRT has been being taught for a very long time under a different name within, elementary, middle school, and high schools in a much more soft way as well. Now it's just a lot more direct, and the parents have actually opened up the textbooks and started reading what their children are being taught. And they do start to notice, wait a minute, like, there is a lot of like anti-white stuff in here. I mean, like the one chapter's on white people are bad because of what they did to Mexican people and they took their land and they took over Texas. Next chapter is how they like genocided Native Americans. The next one is all about slavery and how white people did slavery. And they're like, wait a minute, like my son's white. He's a minority in his country now. What do everyone else in the class think of him now that they've read, the Mexican kids are mad because of the first chapter, and then the Native American kids, and then the black kids, and then, the Asian kids because of the internment camps for the Japanese. I mean, you start to see that our education system is a little bit one-sided, and it's been that way for a very long time. Luckily now, parents have started to look into it, but it's because the left has tried to like crank it up another 10 degrees, and they're pushing their luck there.
yeah, and that's the thing too is it's like it's revenge racism is basically what it is. But the left wants the country further divided. It's easier to pit all these little victim groups against each other and then
Yeah,
maintain control because they're worrying about each other and not worrying about the big problem, which is the government.
exactly.
Uh,
100%. And
and
this is why the media does it, the government does it. All of them are in on this because they do not want to be noticed, right? I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell, I haven't confirmed this, but I read that she got 10 years taken off of her prison sentence.
yes,
And it was the same day that the Supreme Court leak was, right? And I'm not saying that was coordinated or anything. It's just an interesting coincidence, if anything. But
yeah,
it is interesting to note that, like, we can't spend time tracking down global pedophiles who exist. Like, there was a global child sex trafficking ring based out of America. And no one was aware of this. Like, no one was looking into this. And the people who did know about this and they would say it, well, people are too concerned about like the BLM riots. They're too concerned about, what their kids are learning in school. They're too concerned about the transgender stuff and the pride parades outside their house and, all these various things. The elite do pin us against each other. So we're so distracted that we can't see what's going on behind the scenes with them.
well, I still want to know how like Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of running a child sex trafficking ring, and there's zero convictions for all her customers, no names in the press, no anything.
Right.
Did they
Exactly. And
did
this
they
should be
not
the biggest
exist?
story of the decade.
Yeah, that whole black book should be public information. Even if they can't pursue charges on some of these people, it
Yep.
should be known who the customer list was.
Oh, exactly. And I mean, look at January 6th, how all the people are being persecuted, these right-wing people, and yet they can't do that for the people on Epstein's Black Book, who, I mean, this might sound crazy, okay, for any left-wingers watching, but I do think that participating in child sex trafficking is worse than breaking windows at the Capitol. Well, I know it's crazy,
Yeah,
but that is my opinion.
some of these really think it's crazy now with this whole effort to normalize being a MAP, a minor attracted person. To get us back on track a little bit here, though, there was one other election story I wanted to cover before we wrap up. In New Mexico, I guess there's going to be big news breaking tomorrow. They've been doing audits of through chain of custody, and determined that more ballots were turned in than were actually votes cast on election night and through mail-in and everything else. So this graph down here on the lower left illustrates what the actual vote count was, and this is cumulative. That's why it raises versus what was actually being turned in.
Wow. Yeah. So, I mean, it's amazing too how we have increasing levels of proof, and there's just increasing evidence with every passing day with this stuff. And yet, no one seems to be taking it seriously, and nobody seems to be taking note of it. When in
No.
reality, I mean, this is a major story. I mean, when is the last time there's been a major election swung in America? When this happens in other countries, we hear about it. We hear about Ukraine. It's like, oh, the election, blah, blah, blah. When
Yeah.
Ukrainian election, I don't really care, right? This is an American election. This is my president that I'm concerned about.
Yeah. Well, I think what's going to end up happening with this is the dam is going to break. One of these stories is going to get to be too much. The mainstream media will be forced to cover it when there's a court decision or something like that. where they've ignored this. And if you're a, you're a normie or somebody on the left, you haven't heard a word about something that's been happening quietly in the background for the last 6 to 8 months. When all of a sudden that story happens and machines are pulled out of 10 states or whatever
Yeah.
else happens, it's going to be a surprise, and there will be backlash afterwards because people are going to feel like they were lied to.
Yeah, well, let's hope so, and that certainly is justified. And I do have to mention too. I think we're just about out of time here, but I did get a text message all of a sudden from Trey from Planned Parenthood. It's one of those automated texts, and it's like, we're here to provide safe abortions no matter where you are, no matter what happens. And it made me think again, like, how is it that Planned Parenthood is able to organize these mass campaigns? I mean, I know like Trump does this where with the text messages and stuff, but like, wouldn't it be great if we had churches in America who were sending out mass texts like, "Hey, I'm from like the local church and we'd love to give you, Jesus and a free Bible." I mean, I
Yeah.
would love to see right-wingers participating in this mass organization. But again, another example, even someone like me, I'm getting like text messages on my phone about Planned Parenthood and getting safe abortions. How many young teenage girls just got that notification on their phone?
Yeah, you're right, because it probably just went out to thousands of people.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands probably.
yeah, but the head of the FDA wants you to know that misinformation is the leading cause of death.
Yes, you know what? We do have to, before we end, we do have to show the misinformation video because it is just so absurd that we can't end without showing it.
Yeah. So
There's already this idea, this allegation that there is anti-conservative bias on the platforms, even though there has been study after study proving, in fact, that often it's liberal voices that are being silenced, particularly minority voices on social media. So I think we're going to see more allegations.
I lost the tail end of it there. But as usual, women and minorities hardest hit.
Wow, it's unbelievable that censorship. When I think of people who are censored, think of like people who have been banned from like Twitter. I think of the transsexual black woman in a wheelchair because
Yeah.
they're the hardest hit by censorship.
Yeah, it's all the left-handed pansexual leprechauns that have been pulled down Twitter. That's what our country is really missing right now.
Yeah, apparently it hurts my head honestly to just the irony of it. It almost is not even worth pointing out because it's so obvious, but like the minister of truth saying that like black people and women are being banned more on social media than conservatives, right? And like, I'll even say like, yeah, like black conservatives and women conservatives are censored.
Oh
but
yeah,
to just be
heavily.
like, no conservatives. It's just black women or whatever that are being censored.
Yeah.
What?
You know what? I will give her this. Black conservatives are definitely hit harder even than a lot of white conservatives, because if you have a message that starts to catch fire and catch on, they will pull you off. If it's impacting one of their little victim groups, they will pull you off Twitter immediately.
The Democrats can't have any, less of the black vote. Otherwise, they'd lose every election because they don't have the white vote. They have like all the different minority group votes. So if any of them start like detracting or whatever the right word would be, is like leaving the Democratic Party, then all of a sudden that poses a major problem for the Democrats. I've always said the Republicans don't need more, black voters and Asian voters and Hispanic voters. They just need the Democrats to not have those voters, and that's how the Republicans can win.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure the Democrats are terrified right now. Like we covered the story a few weeks ago where I think it's a 61% decrease in Hispanic support for Democrat candidates in the last 15 months. I just saw another one where the black support for Republican candidates has gone up, especially as we've had a lot of these strong black candidates that are ultra conservative that are running. Right. And there's several good ones out there, and there's a few that are still in the race. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on her name, but the lady that was running up against Dr. Oz that just beat him down in that last debate. Again, like this is somebody that came out of nowhere that woke up over the last few years, and they're highly effective at messaging. And if they go forward, the Democrats really need to be scared.
Exactly, but luckily we don't need to be scared on Punching Left because we have the greatest content, and we always are providing the most up-to-date news for everybody. And I think that's just about all we have for today on our show. So thank you all for joining us here tonight. We will be back here, of course, Tuesday at 7:30, then Thursday at 7:30 Eastern Time, live for you guys, YouTube, Twitch, and Odyssey as always. Mike, do you have any closing words for us?
Everybody stay safe out there. Don't get accosted at your church or assaulted by these left-wing fanatics. Stay safe. We'll see you Tuesday night.
Happy Mother's Day.
Yeah, happy Mother's Day.